Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. The Super Bowl halftime show has long been an altar to American spectacle, an intricately choreographed, corporate-sponsored moment engineered to sustain attention in the age of distraction. But in its most potent iterations, it becomes more than entertainment. It becomes a site of power, where narratives are shaped, histories are rewritten, and resistance is either sanitized or weaponized. In 2025, Kendrick Lamar entered this arena not as a participant, but as a disruptor, manipulating the very mechanisms of spectacle to subvert its logic. Michel Foucault reminds us that power is not merely exercised through repression, but through the production of norms, through the careful curation of what is visible, permissible, and celebratory. Lamar's performance began with a voice that has long embodied authority in American cinema. Samuel L. Jackson, his cadence theatrical yet ominous. "It's your Uncle Sam, and this is the great American game." The phrase, drenched in irony, functioned as both a declaration and a warning. The game, whether football, capitalism, or the performance of identity, was not neutral terrain. Then came the first rupture. A 1987 Buick Grand National GNX emerged from the stage's depths. Its black exterior gleamed under the stadium lights, but its significance was layered. In the Arcades project, Walter Benjamin speaks of objects as vessels of history, imbued with meaning beyond their physicality. The GNX was one such artifact, a relic of 1980s Black American aspiration, a machine that symbolized both power and precarity. It was a car designed for speed, but Lamar, standing atop it unmoving, refused its intended function. This was a deliberate inversion, a Deleuzian deterritorialization of mobility itself. The music began, not with a familiar anthem, but with Bodies, an unreleased track whispered about in the digital underground. Theodor Adorno's critique of pop culture as a site of standardization resonated in this moment. The Super Bowl, in its usual form, thrives on repetition, on nostalgia repackaged as innovation. Lamar resisted this impulse. He offered no instant gratification, only friction, a demand for engagement over passive consumption. His outfit, too, was an argument. A Martine Rose varsity jacket, signalling the intersection of streetwear and high fashion, clashed against a pair of bootcut jeans, an artifact of early 2000s suburban Americana. It was anachronistic, unsettling in its refusal to conform. Fashion, as Roland Barthes argued, is a language, and here Lamar was speaking in contradictions. Then, movement. Squabble Up jolted through the sound system, and the stage erupted in red, white, and blue tracksuits. To the casual viewer, it was a nod to the occasion's Americana, but it was something else too, a reference to the uniforms of Compton's rival gangs, now synchronized in choreography. The dancers formed the American flag with their bodies, not static, not an emblem of nationalism, but fluid, transient, alive. This was a Brechtian gesture, transforming the spectacle into a site of critical reflection. And then, the line that cut through it all: too loud, too reckless, too ghetto. Jackson's voice, now accusatory, reverberated through the stadium. Judith Butler reminds us that language is not merely descriptive, it is performative, shaping reality through repetition. This was the voice of power, the voice of history, policing black artistry. But Lamar did not flinch. He turned the accusation into momentum, refusing to be disciplined by its weight. By now, the audience was no longer passive. The performance had ceased to be entertainment. It had become an interrogation. And in that shift, the halftime show had already achieved what few before it had dared. It had transformed the Super Bowl into an unresolved question rather than a packaged product. The tension in the stadium had reached its peak, not in volume, but in expectation. If the first half of the performance had been a dialectic, a confrontation between spectacle and subversion, what followed was its synthesis, a moment of calculated control. The opening bars of Not Like Us pulsed through the sound system, and the stadium collectively held its breath. There are diss tracks, and then there are cultural reckonings masquerading as diss tracks. The feud between Lamar and Drake had long since transcended hip-hop, becoming a referendum on authenticity, appropriation, and power within the music industry. But Lamar, ever the tactician, refused to deliver the moment on cue. Instead, he grinned. "I want to perform their favourite song," he teased, "but you know they love to sue." The audience erupted, not just in excitement, but in recognition. The reference was surgical. Drake's ongoing defamation lawsuit against Universal Music, a last-ditch attempt to contain a narrative already outpacing him. It was the kind of moment that Deleuze and Guattari might describe as a deterritorialization of power itself. Lamar had flipped the legal apparatus into performance art. Then, the pivot. All the stars. A sudden shift into melody, into something softer, more expansive. It felt at first like resolution, but was it? Byung-Chul Han writes of contemporary power as a force that operates through seduction rather than suppression, through smoothness rather than conflict. Perhaps Lamar was playing with this very notion, offering a moment of calm as a way to lull the audience before delivering the final blow. Even Jackson's voice seemed to acknowledge the game at play. That's what America wants, nice and calm. And then, just as the audience exhaled, Lamar shattered the illusion. The beat slammed down like a gavel, the dancers reignited, their movements suddenly sharper, more violent. Lamar, eyes glinting with mischief, stepped forward. "Hey, Drake." 2 words. That was all it took. What followed was a moment that defied the mechanics of performance. Though he had self-censored the most incendiary lines, likely at the insistence of legal teams and network executives, the devastation remained. Trying to strike a chord, and it's probably A minor. The wordplay was deliberate, layered with multiple meanings. But then came the most visually striking moment, the flags. Enormous banners furled behind him, each bearing the image of children pointing toward a lowercase a. The symbolism was sharp, unmissable. This was not just a song, it was pedagogy, a lesson in power, in perception, in the politics of meaning itself. And then the final flourish, Serena Williams, a flicker, a movement, a crip walk by a lamppost. It lasted mere seconds, but in that instant, the narrative was sealed. In that moment, Lamar had rewritten the script. The Chiefs might have been trailing by 27 points, but there was only one true loser in America that night. Then, the silence. Lamar stood at the center of it all, his breath steady, his expression unreadable. The audience, conditioned to expect a climax, was left suspended. If Not Like Us had been a sledgehammer, the next moment was a scalpel. The violin came first, thin, haunting. It took the audience a moment to recognize the melody, and when they did, the shift was palpable. Sing about me, I'm dying of thirst. It was a Kierkegaardian movement from the aesthetic to the ethical. If Not Like Us was about power, this was about memory, about what remains when the moment is over, when the lights shut off and it's my turn to settle down. The stadium hushed. Lamar was no longer performing for applause. He was speaking into the silence, into history. Roland Barthes speaks of punctum, the wound in an image that refuses to be contained. This was punctum in real time. The audience did not immediately cheer. There was a pause, a crack in the mechanics of spectacle, a moment where the event became unresolvable. And then Lamar stepped back. No bow, no raised arms, just the silence stretching into the night. Then, as quietly as he had arrived, he was gone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Deeper Thinking podcast, an audio essay read by me, Holly, your digital narrator. To learn more about the subjects covered today, check out the links in the show notes. Until next time.